Well, it's wonderful to be back with all of you again, and I have missed you all, and I talk about you all the time, and half of it at least is true. So I'm Pat Doyle, and I came to Kendal in 2003 as your opening executive director, and I retired in 2018. So I got to do the first 15 years of Kendal's life, including the 18 months before we opened. So with that said, let's start with Suzanne.
And I am Suzanne Adele, and I came right along with Pat, right at the start. A very frightening experience, and probably the very best decision that I made in my life, because it has been wonderful.
And I have to ask you to tell the story. Harold, your late husband, I understand he was enthusiastic about coming here.
Hardly.
Hardly, yes.
But turned out to be very enthusiastic and participated in so many things and was taken up with many of the lovely things that both of us enjoyed, like dinners downstairs.
Suzanne and Harold were my secret weapon, because every time we had a husband who was not so sure, we'd get him to talk to Harold, who would say, I came here kicking and screaming. It was the best decision I ever made. Betty?
I'm Betty Albertson. I moved here with my husband, Bob, 1 month after it opened. We came from Long Island, New York. And before we moved here, we looked at several CC places in the area, but decided that Kendal on Hudson suited us the best, and we've never regretted it.
Terrific. And Circa?
I'm Circa Babo. My husband Hugh and I came here on August 5th, 20 years ago from Boston. Before that, we chose this Kendal, of course, because it is Quaker, and because our daughter and her growing family lived then in West Village. Before that, Hugh had taught church history, Quaker history, and peace studies at Earlham College and Earlham School of Religion, and also been very involved in all kinds of Quaker proceedings, both nationally and internationally.
Terrific.
I am Annette Layden. I came here on May 9th, 2005, together with Joan Vogel. And my husband had a bad case of Parkinson's, and we felt that we had to go someplace where he could be taken care of. And the only other place we looked at didn't have any room, so we just came here. We chose an apartment, and we really didn't do anything else. And I think it's the very best decision that we both made our entire life.
Lovely. Marion?
I'm Marion Lemker, and Tom and I moved in August of 2005. We were conditioned to a retirement community because both of our parents had been living in one at the end of their lives, and it was worked out very well. We knew Kendal by reputation and originally signed on up at Dartmouth in Hanover. And I think but we were not anywhere near ready to move at that point. But I think because we were on the list up there, we got the mailings about this place being built. And Tom grew up in New York City overlooking the river, and he thought that would be a great way to wind up. So that's why we chose it, and it has been completely satisfactory.
Wonderful.
I'm Anna Mae O'Leary. I came to Kendal on May 17th in 2005. My husband had died, and I really didn't need or want to stay in a large house. So I thought I better start downsizing and get ready to move someplace, and Kendal was the answer.
Great. And Caroline?
I'm Caroline Purcell. My husband Charlie and I knew we wanted to live in a Kendal because we had family and friends at other Kendals, and we saw the value of moving in while you're still young enough to enjoy doing things. So we moved from New York City into Kendal on Hudson when it opened in 2005. And soon Charlie was on the Residence Council, including serving as one of its early chairs. Since I was still teaching at NYU, initially I was only on the computer committee. After retirement, I became more active here with a great group, including Peter Burmis, Sheila Darnborough, Jean DeBow, Gretchen Engler, Fran Kelly, Bill Seligman, and others. And we created and produced the Residence website for 6 years.
Lovely. And Valerie?
I'm Valerie Wallace. My husband Paul and I moved in July of 2005 on the very hottest day in July, I think, ever. We were the second people to move into Elita because that was the last building to be finished. There was not a lot of publicity about Kendal in our town, which was Chappaqua, because it seemed to be only known along the river towns or people who went to Phelps Hospital. But Paul happened to hear about it from a friend of his who was in an exercise class with him in Chappaqua.
And Deb?
And I'm Deb Wood, and I moved into Kendal in July of 2005. But in the mid-90s, a good friend of ours, Horst Berger, said to his wife, Gay Berger, who was the first chair of the board of Kendal on Hudson, and he said to her, "Tell me, why do we have to move to Pennsylvania?" And it all started from there.
Lovely. Okay, and we'll start with Suzanne. So, among the many things you were involved in and early on is the library committee, and so I would love for you to just talk for a few minutes about the library.
The library. Well, the library is the quintessential Kendal operation in my book. It is completely run by the residents, although I should say we do get some good help from our drivers who are willing to carry heavy loads of books back and forth from the public library, Warner, in Tarrytown. But it's a big group. We are well over 30 people, and the dedication of this group is remarkable. We still have Ed Hannon, who has been with us since day one, week after week, showing up for his assigned spot, never misses. And along with a slew of other people who have become just as devoted. There seems to be a satisfaction in a job that's concrete, and we are a community of such readers, and there is such interest in books that it has unfolded just beautifully. The connection with the community has been good too. We have worked up an arrangement with Warner for people from their own apartments to determine on the computer whether there is a certain book that they want that's here. If it isn't, they can hook up with the Warner people. The book will be found from any library in the Westchester system. It will be delivered here. Our people will get in touch with the person who's interested to let them know that it's here. They come down, they get it, and when they're finished, it's returned to the library at Kendal and then returned to Warner. They don't have to leave their apartment, and they are very, very delighted with the service. And Warner is wonderful, really extremely cooperative in what they have done and tracked, cared about over all the years. The system is one that just allows people to work together, overlap, do things individually or together, and was started by a small group who had books that were donated here and just piled up and turned into a library with computer capability and developed through a renovation that wound up with some very clever architect sliding a new library under the bridge there. And it's a beautiful spot and a welcoming place for anybody who comes to Kendal.
And I want to ask one question before we move on.
Yeah.
Where'd all the books come from, Suzanne?
Many are donations. Many continue to be donations. And it's amazing how much that is. But then we have a resident council that is very generous and gives us a piece of the budget each year, and we use those too.
Fantastic. Okie doke. So, Betty, one of the things that always struck me about Kendal is the fact that from the very beginning, residents wanted to do things to help other residents. And you've been involved in several of those things. So I'm going to ask you to talk about the Welcoming Committee and the co-pilots.
I'll talk about co-pilots first. That was formed by a resident here, and it's run by residents. They sign up for either 8 in the morning or 8 at night, or 8 at night to 8 in the morning, when they will escort someone who has been taken to the emergency and be their buddy. And they'll stay with them until an immediate family can come in, or they come back home. It's a program run by residents for residents. Another program is the Welcoming Committee. And that is for once people move in, to help them feel comfortable about being here. There's many ways of doing that. Some people invite them to dinner, some people go and visit them, some people bring them a flower. But one of the things that was added recently was a day after they move in, they're contacted, and they're offered a daily walking tour of Kendal, one by one. And it's to acclimate them to what is available and how to get around Kendal, mainly how to get from one elevator to the other and how different the elevators are. That is very confusing for people. And many people choose not to do that right away. They'll say, oh, just give me a week and I'll call you. So then I call back again and see if they are ready. If they're not ready in a week, I say, I'll leave my phone number and you call me when you're ready. And many people do call. Sometimes I've had one person that called 4 months later. And some people take the walk with their dog, if they have a dog, which is a very good idea because then they know where the dog can go and where it can't. But it's all run by residents.
You know, one of the things I want to mention about the co-pilots, not only was it a completely resident-created, resident-executed, management had nothing to do with it program, but the one thing management did do without telling anybody was to nominate the program for the State Leading Age Award for Innovation of the Year, which in fact, as many of you will remember, the program won. And it was just thrilling because typically those awards are for, programs created by the organizational management that involve all kinds of technology and expense and this and that and the other thing. And this was an innovation by residents that required willing volunteers and a cell phone. And I just love that that happened. That's wonderful. Thank you, Betty. So, Sirka, no one I think here better qualified than you to talk about the Quaker values and the role that the values play in the community.
Quaker values, or Quaker testimonies, as we also say, are based on the original Quaker belief of that of God in everyone. And from the beginning, Quakers sought to actualize these values in their daily lives. For example, building inclusive communities where everybody was treated fairly, equally, and with respect. And also from the beginning, Quakers were deeply committed to peace and justice, and now also the environment. Mm-hmm. So I like to try to share with you how in some simple ways these values manifest themselves here at Kendal. Community, of course, is fundamental, and that's probably why most of us are here. And we interact every day in numerous multiple ways with each other. I, for example, have developed many I call corridor friends, just walking back and forth and chatting at the mailboxes or sharing in classes and courses. Of course, the Tuesday morning club, and then enjoying wine and cheese and dinner together. I call this almost a ministry of presence, because as our strengths and abilities physically diminish, that we still are able to be available to each other in deeper ways. Next is equality. How thrilled I am when somebody, a 20-year-old, behind the lunch counter calls, "Sirka, what would you like?" And how happy they are feeling at an equal level with staff and residents. Next, simplicity. We do not take a vow of poverty, but Quakers eschew everything pretentious or ostentation. We value good quality and high standards. And also for me, somehow to try to be or live unencumbered by clutter, both inward and outward. And then integrity, which somehow pulls and keeps it all together. We are invited to give input and participation in our procedures, and also we trust that our affairs are here conducted with transparency and accountability, and also that all of our words and actions match. And how thrilled I am that we can still try to put these daily into action.
It really does distinguish this community from a lot of other life care communities that we operate in that manner. Annette. All right, first of all, I'm going to tell you, Annette is the first Kendal resident that as a resident I ate with, because we were at that opening night dinner together in the not terribly well air-conditioned dining room, but it was the first of many, as it turned out. I hope you're going to talk about the Healing Garden. Again, this is such an example of residents saying, what can we do for other residents?
Yes, I remember that dinner very well, and there was champagne, and there was also a huge sheet cake, which Terry Minervini photographed and told me she would give me a copy of the photo, and never did, and I've never forgiven her about it.
I don't have one.
Anyway, the Healing Garden was just a mud hole. When we came, and because my husband was in Clearwater and there was not much for him to do, I would take him out and we would sit in the garden and just enjoy the fresh air. Well, by the second year, I think Charlie Haffey who was a resident here, gave a lot of money, and so did Kendal, and all of a sudden there was a landscaped garden, and it was really very nicely landscaped, but there were things that could be added to it. And of course, I love peonies, so the first thing I did was put 3 peony bushes, and I started deadheading the flowers and watering them, and doing all the things that you have to do with the garden. And now, 20 years later, with Anna Mae's help and the help of the whole horticulture garden, I think it's one of the jewels of, and I hope that marketing makes a big point of showing it.
I think it's really such a highlight. And I think what's so interesting too is, yes, the residents of Clearwater appreciate the experience of being in it, but they also appreciate the experience of watching their fellow residents help grow it. I think it really is such an important message that, across the levels of care, we're all helping each other. It's lovely.
And I just, if I have a second, want to mention that we, many years ago, we started feeding the birds in the fall from about October through April. And I think everybody, both the people who are in the Clearwater and the people who come in to just enjoy watching all these birds floating around.
And I don't know if you even know this, we had a staff member when I was here, she was one of our receptionists, this is probably 2009, who lived in an apartment building and wanted her daughter's First Holy Communion pictures taken in a lovely setting, and asked if she could come over on a Saturday morning, and the daughter was photographed in our healing garden. Isn't that sweet? Okie doke, Marion. So you have done so much work quietly behind the scenes to make things happen. And I would love for you to talk about sort of the creating all of the infrastructure to support the resident council and the resident association.
Well, that is more than I deserve, but my interest when we got here originally was the computer committee. I had become somewhat entranced with computers, trying to keep track of expenses at home. And as it happened, my husband was on the initial residence council, along with Frank Newworth, who became the official treasurer. And of course, both of them were kind of interested in having secretaries around. So I got sort of manhandled into working, I can't say setting up the system, but just getting it going by going to QuickBooks and sort of getting everything pulled together. Every committee was doing its own work and trying to keep track, but it did all have to go to a central place. And so that went on for several years, where I was sort of just helping, really, with the putting stuff in the computer. And then when Peggy Pennell became treasurer, she took it. She was better at the computer than I was, so it went from there. And then we hired an accountant for the council for several days a week. And now I think the administration itself is doing it. It's the total picture is a pretty big one, but each committee, of course, is doing their own thing also. So.
Well, and the budgeting process is complicated because, of course, all of the committees feed into the council. And so there needs to be a consolidation of all the generous contributions coming in that then need to be allocated out, kept track of, book kept, reported, all of those things. And you should take credit for having set that system up.
Well, give it to QuickBooks.
And somebody who knew how to use them.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to move on to Anna Mae. So
The day I moved into Kendal,
Yeah.
it was a very long day, and I was tired, and I needed a break. So I went out, took a walk, got some nice fresh air, and I found a beautiful terrace overlooking the Hudson. It had very nice outdoor teak furniture and 10 large planters. Some of the planters had very small evergreen topiary trees in them. Others had rose bushes, and there were a lot of colorful flowers. I thought, oh, what a great place to come down and just relax and enjoy the view, or sit quietly and read a book, or meet a lot of the residents and maybe start making new friends. Later, the planters became the responsibility of the Horticulture Committee, and that is still true today. Looking back, I can't believe that that was 20 years ago.
And it's still glorious. Now, I remember you, the first time I think I met you, you were actually standing in a planter.
Oh, I did. Those
Because
days are
you were
gone.
hands-on.
I love playing in the dirt, so I love gardening.
Well,
But yeah, I did. I was able to stand in and do some work because I couldn't reach across. But those days are gone. So now I just spend my time with Annette in the healing garden.
lovely.
But it's a big job, so it needs us.
And are residents still doing the planters?
Pardon me?
Are the residents still working on the planters outside?
Since there's going to be a lot of changes made, especially to the terrace, those boxes have been moved, or there are boxes now, and moved over to the side of the building because these planters are going to be destroyed.
To put the,
I hope
Cover.
that when they finish, that planters will be back again because they will be certainly missed. It was a beautiful terrace.
well, in good Quaker practice, I'm sure the resident council will advocate for the return of the planters.
I hope so.
Okay, great. To Caroline, and Caroline has a very particular role, as does Deb at this point. Part of the tradition, of course, of Kendal communities is that there are residents on the board. And it's a particularly important model because residents who serve as board members have the obligation of board members to act in the best interest of the community. The head of the resident council or their designee is the resident representative. And that dynamic is a very interesting and I think a very important one, and I'm going to let Caroline talk about it.
Well, I was asked to join the board about 8 years ago, and I see its primary concerns as being people and finances and planning and tone. And tone might be another word for Quaker values. It's sort of a more Westchester type word for Quaker values. With respect to people, probably the most important thing that the board does is hire the CEO or replace them if necessary. But we try to help them be successful. We try to find the best person and have them be successful. And there have been 3 CEOs transitions in these years since I've been on the board. Finances are the backbone of the Kendal enterprise, and they depend on marketing and enrollments as well as good management. In my years on the board, occupancy in independent living has gone from the low 80s to 94% today, which has helped our finances considerably. The board's finance committee offers important expertise, hard questions, and supports the management. The planning involves thinking beyond the next year of operations to anticipated changes, envisioning new developments or potential possibilities and problems, and deals with crises such as COVID, although the management really handled the COVID magnificently. The board, I think they did the lion's share of that. By tone, I mean the way the board members, administrators, and residents relate to each other, seeking to be respectful, honest, and considerate even in the face of tough challenges and decisions. It also includes the worth of every resident, reflected in using first names for everybody, staff to CEO, is just underpins everything. And active support for philanthropy is also important, among other values and actions on the board. So 20 years later, after moving in right at the beginning, my husband Charlie is now living in the nursing unit, very, very well cared for, and I may see him multiple times a day because it's so easy to go down and see him. So we're still very happy that we decided to move to Kendal as we continue to meet wonderful new people, have fun, interesting experiences and challenges.
Terrific. And Val is, I'm going to ask you about, I've lost track of what, the Tuesday Morning Club to start with.
Yes. My husband, Paul, when he started to fail, began to come down to the Tuesday Morning Club, which was started by residents, including, I believe, Deb started the music part. And it is an activity that takes place Tuesday morning. There's games, there's a music session, a memory session when everybody is asked, do you remember your first date, or what did you do on the 4th of July, or what was your favorite Thanksgiving pie, or something like that. And then there's a games table, and the games table has changed. It used to be that we were very interested in Scrabble, and now it's puzzles and Quirkle and dominoes. And then after we have games, and there's an arts and crafts project, then we go, then there's a music session and everybody gets a large printed song sheet so you can follow along, and we have amateur musicians from the community come in and play all sorts of instruments.
Wonderful. And this is another example, I think, of residents saying we want to help our fellow residents. This was not an idea that came from management. This was an idea that came from a group of people saying, you know, we're feeling as we were, I guess, 4 or 5 years in, that there are some folks for whom the activities that are taking place are really not quite what they need. And let's think about how to make sure that there's something regular for them to do as well. And that's really, I think, where it all began. And I do love the fact, I know it was true when I was at Kent here, I don't know if it still is, one of the things that Tuesday morning group used to do was make little art projects that were sent along with the Meals on Wheels, because our kitchen does Meals on Wheels for Sleepy Hollow. They would send those art projects along with the Meals on Wheels to homebound seniors in the community. And I thought that was such a lovely thing, because it really did allow everybody who lived here, whatever their circumstances, to do something for someone else. It was just delightful.
They still do that.
That's lovely. And then we should talk about CAFA.
Well, CAFA is all over the place. It filled the hallways with resident-donated furnishings and artwork, and then they also buy posters and things, you know, mostly posters for just to brighten up the hallways. It was an immense project led by Jackie Wilkie long before Kendal actually opened. How she ever kept track of where everything was coming from and who was donating what is amazing. And right now, it's mostly rearranging things. Of course, everything is going to get upset again with Project Refresh, so it'll be another huge job. But everything here in the hallways was, it was not bought by some organization. It was really put together by the residents.
And it's always been one of the most interesting things that marketing uses as they take people to tour the community, because as you've all likely been at others, it's hotel art in the hallways, and here we're able to say every apartment's doorway is a representation of the owner, and it really, from a marketing point of view, gives prospective residents such a sense of kind of what the community feels like. It makes such a difference. Okie dokie. And let me then go on to Deb to talk about the resident council.
Yes, the Residents' Council is the body that takes care of the residents. They're a liaison between the board. A liaison between administration and the residents. And they ask for contributions several times a year, twice a year to honor staff, and once a year for charitable contributions. That there is then a committee of the Residents' Council that sends those charitable contributions to community not-for-profit organizations. And keep us connected with the community and also connected with each other in that.
You know, and I think that is one of the most interesting aspects of sort of the arc of Kendal on Hudson becoming part of the Sleepy Hollow community, was the decision of the council to focus on local outreach to philanthropic organizations. You know, I have such a clear recollection when I first got here, before we even opened. There was a significant constituency in the Sleepy Hollow community that was not enthusiastic about this giant nursing home that was going to be built, that was going to vote against school budgets. That was, you know, a lot of people, a bunch of old people, they don't have kids, they won't vote in favor of school budgets. And the extent to which the council played such a fundamental role in changing the understanding of the community of Sleepy Hollow about what this community was, I think was really so important. And I remember one year, the Kendal on Hudson community, largely as an extension of the resident council's efforts, actually was named the Organization of the Year by the Foundation for the Public Schools of the Tarrytowns. You know, 10 years after they didn't want us because we were all going to vote against the school budget. But it's a terribly important part of the work that I think the council does.
And actually, one of the residents of Kendal served for several years as chair of the Sustainable Sleepy Hollow Committee that keeps Sleepy Hollow sustainable. So
It's been quite a change in impression and attitude. Okay. So I'm thinking back to the first months after we opened and the move-in process. And I think we should all talk about that first summer. Who remembers how sweltering hot it was? Oh, yes. Right? And in this building, we were moving in 4 people a day. So Annette and Joan were the first 2 on the first day, but after that, it was 3 and 4 a day. And it was Crazyville. It really was. And did everybody get their sandwiches?
Oh, yeah. Those were a big gift.
I really do think Mark Gidding came up with some wonderful ideas for that move-in period. I mean, everybody, the day you moved in, there was a sandwich order and sandwiches were delivered to your apartment.
They don't do that anymore.
Oh, no.
No, I mentioned that to someone who moved in recently, and they said, we didn't get that.
And the other thing that was delivered was a handbook, a Kendal handbook, which you handed to us in person and said we could use it as a doorstop. At the time.
Yes, here's a
Actually
brief summary of how we're going to proceed, but there was so
Very
much
handy.
stuff, right?
Oh, there sure was.
And what I remember so vividly, I'll talk about this a little more tonight, is, you know, the sort of magic of everything that went wrong in that summer. The first blackout, when we discovered, among other things, that the toilets that were auto flush were not on the generator. And so I remember, and then we had the flood in Claremont, as opposed to the later flood in the Robert Fulton. I mean, it was just it was insane, it was chaos, but I think it was such a bonding experience for us all, too. So let me think about some other things I should ask you all about. Let's talk a little bit more maybe about the relationship between the administration, the board, and the resident community. I don't know if you all know that at most CCRCs, about the extent of it is the head of the resident council shows up at the beginning of a board meeting, gives a report, and is dismissed. And then, you know, the board and by the way, there are no residents on the board in most CCRCs. And I just wonder what you all see as the value of both residents on the board and having the council person, chair or his designee, her designee, there. Somebody's going to have to take a swing at this.
I think it's wonderful. I had no idea that the other RCCs didn't have this. I mean, it seems a logical thing to do, and it keeps us all together. The board knows what we're doing, we know what they are doing, and I think it's just of great value.
I didn't realize that the other Kendals didn't do that.
Well, the other Kendals do it, but most CCRCs
Oh,
don't.
the other Kendals do it, but not the other CCRs.
Yeah. Yeah, in some form or fashion.
Yes.
Now-
Well, I feel better then that the Kendals are doing it.
It's bedrock of the Kendals. Betty, you also played another role that I'm going to ask you to just talk about for a second and a half. You were on the Phelps board on
Yes.
behalf of Kendal on Hudson.
That was at a time when they were considering where they were going to merge, who they were going to merge with. And I was the token one from Kendal on the board. And it was an interesting time to be there because that was the time where they were considering their options of who to join. And believe it or not, one of the people they were thinking of joining was the Connecticut, New London.
Yale, New Haven?
Yeah, that was one of the ones was being considered. But then they, of course, ended up with Northville. It was a very interesting time to do it, and I enjoyed it, but I resigned because my eyes got so bad that I could no longer feel that I could contribute when I couldn't read things properly. And then I had followed Gay Berger. She had been on it for umpteen years. So I replaced her when her health began to fade. And I think they decided they didn't want another person. Is that correct? Because no one replaced me. I think they decided they did not need a Kendal representative.
I don't think it was specific to another Kendal representative. I think that once Northwell really became the parent
Yes.
company and they became an operating unit,
They had their own versions.
Northwell had a very different point of view about who should be on
Yes.
the board of the single hospital, which frankly was not the decision-making board because Northwell made the decisions corporately. But I think one of the things that's not probably, we should probably talk about this for a second just for the benefit of history, which is the combined role of the SGRA and Phelps and K Corp in pulling this all together.
What is SGRA?
The SGRA is the Study Group for Retirement Alternatives, which is the name that Gay called a meeting at Purchase after Horst said, "Why do I have to move to Pennsylvania?" And in true and good Quaker practice, she put the word out that if others would like to participate in conversations about this, please come together. And my understanding is the original thinking was not let's build a $220 million CCRC. It was more along the lines of, can we kind of get a cooperative thing going here where, if you no longer need the walker, you can loan it to this other person. And I think it was more, I'm looking at Deb because I think you were involved fairly early in SGRA. Yes. But very quickly, it was, I think, clear to that group that this really was fundamentally a question of, can we do what is traditionally done largely under Quaker sponsorships in Pennsylvania here in Westchester? And of course, the first challenge was, we need to figure out, we, SGRA, a professional organization that can assist and guide and help and support. And ultimately, the SGRA chose the Kendal Corporation. Many people think Kendal chose us. No, we chose Kendal. But one of the really critical issues starting out was where physically to build. I'm actually going to pass the microphone down because I think you know the story of Jim and Twink Wood and the finding of this land.
Kendal was saying, our communities are about 100 acres, so please look for a piece of property in the area. Westchester County was not a possibility partly because the county provides a lot of the drinking water for New York City. So we looked at what had been a Girl Scout summer camp in Putnam County. We looked at a couple of sites in Dutchess County, and finally, Jim and
Twink Wood, I believe.
Jim and Twink Wood, one of them, or possibly both of them, were on the board of Phelps and knew that in the 1980s that Phelps had been interested in developing a piece of their property as an old people's home or some other type of community facility. And the story goes on from there.
Yes. It's it was actually, I believe, Twink who brought that information to the attention of the SGRA, and it was Jim who was a close friend of Martin Van Hingel, who was he was the chairman of the board at Phelps. Yeah. And so phone calls were made, and this completely inaccessible piece of property was identified. And then, of course, the question became, can it be made accessible? And B, can you build a Kendal on 22 acres? And that meant, first of all, we were going vertical, which was unprecedented. We were the first apartment-style Kendal community. And then there was a tremendous amount of work done in partnership with the hospital. We had a representative board during the development period, which means there were 3 people selected from the SGRA, there were 3 people selected from the Kendal Corporation, and there were 3 people selected from Phelps, who, that group of 9 people were the first board that Gay became chair of. And they had to figure out how to make this a viable possibility. And the big issue was the entrance road, which ultimately required the agreement of the town of Mount Pleasant, Phelps Hospital, the village of Sleepy Hollow, and Mr. Rockefeller, who still at that time owned a lot of property right up in that area where the rock cut is. And he had to be asked if he would be willing to give us access in perpetuity. And I will say, I believe I am correct, that it was Martin Van Hingel who actually went to the Rockefellers and asked for that. And his response was immediately, of course. And that was critical, because without that, we did not have an access road. But that was a very dramatic period of time. I believe I'm correct, Deb, you may know this. I believe that in the development process, we ran out of money twice, where I think that's correct.
I remember that.
Development money.
Yes.
And because the money obviously was raised, many of the founder community actually were asked to purchase unsecured bonds, which turned out ultimately to pay very well. They got their money back plus interest. But there were 2 points at which they would go back out to borrow more money. I know the second time around, between Gay and Martin, they called everybody they knew in Westchester County, which I believe is everybody in Westchester County. Money was raised for a second, third tranche at that point to get us over the finish line to get to here. But it was a remarkable partnership to build this community. And I think many people think, oh, well, you know, Kendal Corporation decided Westchester would be a good place to build, and they looked around and they found a group of people to help, and it is exactly the opposite.
And we learned from the original architect that to accommodate the size of the community, they were going to build a big single edifice that would have multiple stories, until somebody suggested 4 separate buildings connected with the bridge, which immediately transformed it into a village feeling instead of a very, very huge
Apartment building.
Yeah.
And there are other wonderful accommodation stories. Originally, there were no apartments on the terrace level. Those groups of apartments were going to be pushed out sort of onto the lawns. They were being called maisonettes. And somewhere in the approval process, that was non-compos mentis. And so they were pulled back into the buildings. So everybody who's living on a terrace level, and then there was no access from those apartments that had been pulled back into the buildings into the main buildings, except along the outside walkways. And I do recall Martin one day in a board meeting saying to an architect, "Are you aware of the temperature in January on the river?" And that's why we ended up with those doorways that go into the garage that then get you to the main elevators without being outside. I mean, all of these, you know, everybody had a contribution someplace along the way that ultimately got us to this. And it's so lovely. So lovely.
And one other requirement of Phelps was that their view of the river not be obstructed.
From the James.
From the James House.
Yeah. That's why we couldn't go higher.
We actually took a floor out of the Mary Powell building at the last minute. The architects had to design it down a floor so that it would not interfere with the view.
And there's half a floor off of 2 of the buildings.
Yes.
Can I just interject that it seems to me that with the growth of the trees, et cetera, in the summertime, I don't think James House has much of a view of the Hudson.
Yeah, I'm going to tell this story tonight, but I'll tell you all real quickly. January of 2004, freezing cold, there was a key meeting that was one of the first ones I attended. Phil Zegarelli had called it because he wanted to put to bed for once and for all this issue of views. And all of us gathered on a freezing cold Saturday morning on the terrace at the James House and looked out. And Phil said, "Can everyone see the river?" And it was agreed everyone could. And as we're walking down to the next stop on this tour day, Phil whispered in my ear, "Didn't do it in July."
Makes a difference.
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
I remember all sorts of loud parties at the James House in the early years.
Yes.
The music and the dancing and the hullabaloo went it way beyond our Quaker midnight.
Yes, well, and you know, it was the rule in town was supposed to be 11 o'clock. But of course, I believe it's the Phelps Auxiliary had the responsibility for helping the James House to be a venue for parties and weddings and engagement parties, which made a significant financial impact for the hospital, which was lovely. But originally nobody was in the area who would be disturbed by midnight noise. Now, the 300 neighbors down here were. But I don't think they're doing that anymore up there.
No.
Pretty quiet.
Yeah.
Totally quiet and silent.
That building needs a massive amount of renovation to be, but it's National Historic Register, so taking it down is also not an option, alas. Anybody else got anything? Okay, we're there.
Thank you, that's great.
Thank you. This was fun. It was so fun.